to Jewish Awareness Ministries School of Biblical and Jewish Studies. We're going to be looking at a subject about the servant of Isaiah. Now, it's very clear if you're a Bible believer who is being spoken of here, but certainly this is contested in the Jewish world, and we are going to see as we go through this lesson or this series on the servant of Isaiah, who the servant of Isaiah is and what he has done. And we'll see very clearly that it is not at all what the Jewish world would claim of the servant. There are 4 servant passages in Isaiah. Those are Isaiah chapter 42, verses 1 through 7. Isaiah 49, 1 through 6. Isaiah 50, 4 through 11. And then Isaiah 52, 13 through the end of chapter 53, that very well-known chapter, Isaiah 53. Now, as we start on our journey of the servant passages, what we're going to do in this lesson is just get an overview of what is taking place, an introduction. The servant or a servant is used of 3 different entities in the book of Isaiah. It's used of individuals. For example, in Isaiah chapter 20 in verse 3, Isaiah is referred to as a servant. In Isaiah 22:20, Eliakim is also referred to as a servant. Then in Isaiah 37:35, David is mentioned as a servant. So individuals are referred to as a servant in the book of Isaiah. We also have Israel. Repeatedly, Israel is mentioned as God's servant. These are just some of the passages where you will find that. In Isaiah 41, 8 through 9. Isaiah 44 in verses 1 and 21. In Isaiah 45, verse 4, and chapter 48, verse 20. There are other portions of Isaiah that Israel is mentioned as the servant, but Israel is God's servant as well. Individuals are God's servant. But then we have the Messiah. The Messiah is mentioned as God's servant in Isaiah. It's the 4 servant passages that I mentioned as we opened up this lesson. So we have these entities, individuals, Israel, and the Messiah mentioned as God's servant. Now, there is a contrast in Isaiah between Israel, the servant, and Messiah, the servant. For example, we are told that Israel, the servant, is sinful and corrupt. Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 4. Israel is blind. Chapter 29, verse 10. Israel is unrighteous. Chapter 48, verse 1. In contrast, the Messiah is perfect. Isaiah 53, 9. Messiah gives sight to the blind. Isaiah 42, 7. And he is righteous. So we have this contrast between Israel as the servant of God and Messiah as the servant of God. Now, as we ultimately will look at these servant passages, the first 2 servant passages tell us what the servant will do. The last 2 servant passages tell us how the servant will do it. So in Isaiah chapter 42 and 49, we have the details on what he will do. In chapter 50 and 53, really starts at 52. I'm being general now in what I'm stating. But in 50 and 53, we have the how. How will the servant of God, the Messiah, do what he has been promised? Let me give you a little bit of background in the context of Isaiah and the context leading up to the servant passages. In Isaiah chapter 40, in verses 1 through 11, we are told down towards the end of that, verse 10 or 11, "Behold your God." Now, up to this point, up to chapter 40, Isaiah, especially in the first 12 chapters, has presented the hope of the Messiah, the hope of the Lord to Israel, that he is a well of salvation, and the comfort that is to be offered to the people of Israel is through the Messiah. Well, in chapter 40, it picks up where chapter 12 left off, with comfort ye, my people. And how were the people to be comforted? Behold your God. And the first 11 verses of chapter 40 detail the God of Israel and what he will do for the people. You want to be comforted? Behold the God of Israel. In chapter 40, in 12 through 31, what we have here is God addresses the Jewish people. And he addresses them as a rebellious, idolatrous people. They're actually worshiping idols. And he says to them, "Whom will you compare to me, and who will you liken to me?" He has presented himself in these verses, 12 through 31, as the omnipotent, the all-powerful, the omniscient, the all-knowing, the omnipresent, everywhere God of the universe. And how foolish to be worshiping idols made of stone or wood. So he addresses the Jewish people. In Isaiah 41, 1 through 7, he now addresses the Gentiles. And he does the same thing in a very much shorter way. How foolish of you to worship idols when you can know the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent God of the universe, the God of Israel. So he addresses the Gentiles. In Isaiah 41, 8 through 19, what God does is he gives his apologetic to the world, not only to Jews, but to Gentiles who are following after other gods. And basically what he says is, I can prove that I am the one true God by pre-written history. Israel is my apologetic. Just study their history, the prophecy, and it has come to pass. Well, what we find in verses 20 through 23 of Isaiah 41, God challenges those who follow other gods or other religions to defend their belief. How should they defend it? And you'll find in these verses, pre-write history. And the reason is, to pre-write history, you have to know everything in advance, omnisciency. You have to be all-powerful, omnipotent, to make sure nobody thwarts your plan. And you have to be omnipresent everywhere to make sure that you're not outnumbered and your plan is, again, thwarted. So present your defense of your God, all the other gods of the world, through prophecy. Then at the end of chapter 41, in verses 24 through 29, we are basically told one is coming with good news. So this is the lead up to the first servant passage of Isaiah, of chapter 42. And we will be looking in the lessons ahead at these servant passages and how they clearly speak of the coming of Messiah, that one who is promised to come, the God of Israel. And so until our next lesson, shalom.